Yeah, I would consider myself a gamer. I've been a gamer since video games came to the home, when I was a little kid.
I'm a gamer first and foremost. I love gaming. I've been gaming all my life. It's my career, it's my hobby. Gaming provides young gay people who may not be comfortable with themselves an outlet to be themselves that is totally forgiving, totally accepting, and you get to be anyone you want to be.
The first digital games I played were on an Apple IIe. My dad helped me, and that was something that we did together, and I kind of think about playing with my dad as sort of being the equivalent of the hokey stories of like, yeah, my dad and I used to fix cars together, and that's why I became like an auto engineer. I really enjoy playing all sorts of games, all the way from the big budget titles to small free games that are released by individuals.
I definitely came out as a gamer first because I think being a gamer was so much a part of my closeted identity. It was something safe I could do and love at home, away from people who might make fun of me or who would make me feel different.
I think people actually think of the term gamer and they're like, ugh, this is someone who's antisocial and just sits in front of a screen all day, and that's what they do, and they eat Cheetos. But I'm increasingly of the belief that learning to play games is learning to be a more active participant in society. The world is a set of systems that aren't set in stone, that you can make a change, and a small change can actually set off larger repercussions. So a game can contain within it so many possibilities, and I think that gamers experience that, they internalize it, and they start to look at the world in a new way.
The gamer community is a really diverse place with a lot of different kinds of people who take different approaches to games. I think when most people hear the word gamer, they think about people who strongly identify as like receiving their entertainment from games, like it's a primary source of entertainment, pleasure, and recreation for them. And of course, it also sort of carries these stereotypical connotations of adolescent and post-adolescent guys who are overwhelmingly straight, and who sort of have a kind of like macho, kind of masculinist attitude towards gaming, who enjoy certain kinds of games.
There's a lot of showmanship, there's a lot of I'm really good at this, there's a lot of like stats and knowledge and that kind of thing. For non-gay gamers, their games feel so much more competitive. I think you get people who are very much interested in a solo experience that they can compare to their friends in a way that's about I'm the best.
What's interesting to me is that the idea of gamer is growing a lot. As recently as maybe 10 years ago or so, there was this new idea that all sorts of people could be gamers. There are certainly gay gamers, and I think that they come at games also in a lot of different ways, just like everyone else does.
While I don't particularly like the idea of people labeling themselves, you need a flag to bear once in a while. You need to be to have a term to bring yourself together. Gamer with the Y is also an issue of branding. It gives us a common flag. And I think that it's more about being part of a community than simply saying, I am a gay man and I play video games. Because when it comes down to it, everybody plays something. There's something out there that's geeky that everybody does. And I think what the term gamer does is allows the video game community to be exactly that. It's a gay video game community.
With gamers, there's a lot more sensitivity. Generally, like, you have an experience there of people who know what it's like to feel bullied, and also who know what it's like to sort of want to welcome people into the community. In the gay geek area, I think that that's fairly typical. There's a lot of like, I want you to be part of this. I want you to know that this is awesome. I want you to understand why this is great.
There are a lot of gamers and game designers who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer, or genderqueer, other words, who are really seeking to kind of reinvent games in a new and different way that's very much outside the traditional notions. And that's often called queer games. And that community, I think, is really distinct. For some people, they're just gamers who happen to be gay, right? For others, there are a lot of people who are really interested as people with LGBT experience at seeing games represent them more.
I haven't had the right moment with the right man yet.
Oh, really? Dance with me.
Lead the way.
Interesting thing is that just like everybody, like all gamers in some sense, people are coming from really different places, have different concerns that are born out of their experiences.
Becoming immersed in a fantasy world is awesome. It's so wonderful to live somewhere that is unreal and fantastic, and gaming lets you do that, you know? If I want to fly, I can fly. If I want to cast magic spells, if I want to be, you know, a space marine from the future, if I want anything that I want to do, I can do.
For me, my first experience with video games, my best friend and I would sit down and we'd play Super Mario 3, and we'd be at World 6, and all of a sudden it was time for dinner and he had to go. And it was sort of taking us out into this world of adventure where you could really do anything and be anything.
For most people, games seem like a waste of time. Whether it's, you know, somebody in their living room staring at a screen, or, you know, just crushing candy all day. But actually, I think that those games and all kinds of other games, they ask us as players to try new things. The best games are the games where you have to change the way you do something. And that's what I think is interesting about games. I think that games teach us to look at ourselves in a new way, and of course look at the world in a new way too.
Gaming has taught me almost all of my life skills. Gaming taught me how to be social, and I know that sounds ironic because most people think gaming is an antisocial thing, but I mean, for instance, like Smash Brothers, Mario Kart, Mortal Kombat, all these games were huge in growing up, and they're social games. You have to do them with other people. So gaming taught me all my social skills. Gaming taught me all of my financial skills, like Warcraft 2 and the Warcraft series and StarCraft, all the simulation games, SimCity and Roller Coaster Tycoon, and all of these games, they taught me how to manage things and multitask.
Yeah, well, I've been playing games almost my whole life and making them almost as long. Yeah, they're just a very special form of culture to me, because in part because they do things that other forms of culture don't. Games are the aesthetic form of systems, much as music is the aesthetic form of sound. You know, we all need to learn more about how systems work in order to engage meaningfully with the world, in order to engage with political processes, in order to understand why we didn't get that raise and somebody else did, and how to sort of, you know, live in the world. Games are valuable in a ton of different ways, and they're valuable as tools for self-expression too, right? Just as we think, oh, it's really great for someone to learn how to play music so they can express themselves through sound. I think more and more we're all starting to realize, oh, it's actually really valuable to be able to learn how to make games and how to express yourself through systems.
Gaming and games are one of those things that you start doing when you're little, right? It's one of the first ways you learn how to socialize, it's how you learn how to interact with other people, and it's a huge facet of what you do in your spare time. Video games wind up being really important for people because you get to be part of the story. You get to interact, you get to tell a different view of things. It gets to be your view. When you talk about wanting to see yourself represented in those games, it's about wanting to see yourself represented in your stories. Wanting to be included in the Mass Effect game and see myself there is a lot about, like, I want to play as someone I'd want to be. I don't want to play as the He-Man macho guy, because that's not me. I know they're not going to give Shepard a lisp anytime soon, but it's nice that he can kiss guys at least.
Games are different because games ask us to engage in them and create our own stories. So, you know, if I'm reading a book or going to see a play or going to the movies, and then I walk out and we were together at the movie, and we might say, oh wow, what about that part where? But in a game, you know, I might experience something very differently from the way that you do, just based on the choices that we make. And so for me, That's one of the exciting things about games, that we can share certain aspects of our experience in the game, but they're always going to be slightly different.
Gaming is something that anyone can access. Gaming is something that, well, everybody games. Why not react to the community at large by including as many people as possible? I think it only enriches stories and these video games by making them rich with varying characters.
Diversity in games is a huge, obvious problem that the game industry knows about and is going to have to do something about. Games are embarrassing themselves and have been for a long time.
The gaming industry has tended in the past to really cater to a heterosexual male audience.
A lot of the leaders in the game industry, even in the sort of very large end of the AAA game industry, are aware of how embarrassing this is when they look at their peers in other forms of entertainment.
And so it's very tough being gay. You know, you don't see any protagonist gay characters, with the exception of, you know, things like Shepard from Mass Effect, but that's kind of an optional thing. You get to pick if you want to be gay, but you can also pick to be straight. You're never really forced into the role. And you see that all the time with heterosexual protagonists. You know, you see straight guys as the protagonist. I have to play the straight guy saving the girl, or I have to play, you know, the straight guy who has a wife or whatever. And that's okay. I don't think that that's bad. You know, like, stories are stories, and I think it's great. Any story can be wonderful. I wish there were more stories in the game industry that represented me as a person.
I would say that I'm disappointed with the progress that companies have made up to this point. I think that from the dialogues I've had with a lot of companies, it seems like they are ready to move, but they're scared. I don't think anyone really wants to be the first one to dive in, because I think that you know, gaming is something that there's a lot of people who can be very vocal on the internet, and you know, nobody wants to be like the person who draws the ire first, you know, and be like, that's the company that's doing all that gay stuff. And I think that on top of that, games that are AAA titles are so expensive that game companies don't want to take the risk of being the company that's like, oh, we're going to make a gay character in this game, and we're risking this $10 million franchise.
Being queer is just one, you know, facet of someone's identity. I think it's not something that needs to be included, but by adding it here and there, you're making a more real world. And anytime you're writing a more real world, that's going to pull a player in much more deeply. So I don't see how that could not benefit the developer.
Diversity is incredibly important. It's important to me. It makes a real difference to me when I play a game. If I can see myself somewhere in the game, whether as part of an ensemble of characters and non-player characters, or in character creation, right? Can I sort of make someone who represents me in some way?
Visibility is the way in which an industry says that we recognize that you exist. When you get acknowledgement that you are the intended audience for something, it makes you feel like you're a part of it. Like in Mass Effect, when you're able to choose to be with guys that you want to be with, it makes that gameplay both more immersive for you as a person, but also it lets me know that they know that people like me exist, and that's comforting and helpful.
I think it validates who you are as a person. I think that as someone like me as a kid, I felt like if there were video games that were like, had a gay character that I could relate to, or a gay character that I could, you know, feel affection for, or my character felt affection for, I think it would have made me feel so much more like validated as a person.
It is sort of essential in games in a different way than it is for other forms of culture to be able to experience yourself as part of the system. And if there's a failure of that, then the player either has to just sort of experience this kind of alienation and distance that I think really is a drawback for investing in the game and really sort of playing it with all of your heart. And this is something that I think a lot of average guys, stereotypical gamers, aren't aware of because they have so many choices available to them. And it's not like you have to be able to see yourself in every single game, right? But if you have this experience over and over again, that takes a toll, and it means that you can't invest as fully in the game. You can't play a game with all your heart. And again, it's like, sure, you can do this sometimes, but it uses up a little bit of your willpower and your investment in a different way.
I think there's a slow surge in them starting to recognize that LGBT gamers are actually just as equal to, the straight community as far as numbers are concerned.
A lot of gamers, but even more so people who make games, are aware that it's embarrassing that games are so far behind, that we are sort of fulfilling this stereotype of like a pimply teenager in the basement. And there's more and more anxiety, at least among people who make games, and maybe to a lesser extent among gamers, that to sort of grow out of that phase. But I think that there is a gradual trend, and it's slow, frustratingly slow for a lot of people, to move away from and beyond that at a lot of different levels, from the big budget games all the way down.
But for me, the most important dialogue to be having is how to include characters in games, and making it so that every area that the video gamers are enjoying are representative of those people they're playing with, so that they just see that there are characters out there.
So many people are afraid of gays and lesbians and queer people because of ignorance, because they've never met a gay person, or they've never, actually had a friend who's actually gay, and so they don't have any reason to care about them. And if you play games and you have someone on your squad who's helping you out who's gay, or you have, let's just say that was the case, having someone who's helping you out the entire time, it's like throwing you ammo, being a part of that, like then you actually can form a bond for someone, and it'd be like, oh, I'm forming a bond with someone who's lesbian. Like they're actually not some mythical thing, like they're just normal people. And I think that it could be really helpful for introducing young people to the idea of gays and lesbians, and that they're not anything to be afraid of, that they are normal people, and is just as important for queer kids to see it as it is for straight people to see it as well.
Even just gay side characters let me know that you're expecting me to be there, that you're anticipating that I'm going to play this, that you're expecting me to be a part of it. For example, like GTA 5 has, huge problems, but mostly it feels like, I don't know, just a bleak outlook on everything. And it's hard to play that game and not feel like, it's just not for you. Like that game just blaringly in your face is like, it's not about you, it's not for you. We don't think you're deserving of our time or energy enough to give you a voice here. You don't exist in this city, and that's hard.
We did this, one of our actually male freelancers did an article about why can't there be a female character in the new GTA game? Because they have 3 characters, but they're all very macho male stereotypes. But like, you could just as easily work in a female character.
Would GTA 5 have been different with a main female character? Absolutely, but I don't know, I could have seen, instead of Michael, we could have had Michelle Visage, and she would have really nailed it.
I don't think it would be that hard to mix in, but in response to that article, we did see a lot of feedback where people were like, well, if you had like anything but a white guy in this game, I wouldn't play it. And there were several people who said that, and I was like, well, with that logic, if I had that kind of logic in approaching games where I never played a game unless it had a strictly female protagonist, then I would never play games like Red Dead Redemption or BioShock or Uncharted or like all of these amazing games, simply because I can't get past the fact that I have to play as a dude. And thankfully that I'm not in that position, but the fact that we still are encountering that, I mean, it's a little discouraging, but I kind of wish that gaming companies would just bite the bullet and take the plunge and take the risks that the indie developers are doing.
Yeah, I mean, what's good about the industry today as opposed to, let's say, 5-10 years ago, is that small independent teams can make games, and those games can be very successful. Now it's still hard to do that, and not everyone is successful, but I think that enables different kinds of games to be developed. The indie game community is absolutely incredible because it's kind of risen up through people who are interested in saying new things with games and trying new things. And these are all people who have been raised playing games, so they're gamers too. But games like Papers, Please or Cart Life or Gone Home, Dysphoria, all of these games are exploring new topics and subjects, and they're out there. Many of them are out there for free, so people of all kinds of backgrounds and means can actually play them. So I think there's a really exciting movement in the indie game scene.
Like gay games, if it is my ideal, right? It comes at it from a different perspective. It doesn't give me another Space Marine and just make him kiss boys. It's not just that. It gives me a character who is different and whose differences are celebrated. I mean, I think like probably the queerest game that exists right now, in AAA sense at least, is Portal. Because there you have two female characters who are battling against one another, and you have sort of all the makings of a queer game. It's not about a macho figure who is enacting the male power fantasy of conquering and domination. That's not what it's about, right? It's about two characters who are at opposite ends of a spectrum fighting for different goals. And specifically as the protagonist in that, you're invited to try to be your best in a way that I find super comforting.
I'd have to go back to Fables, because the fact that you could actually swoon and date someone in a game that's of the same sex, and you can actually marry them and adopt kids and have a family just like you could in real life. That's probably the most positive that I've personally experienced.
Well, Gone Home was really kind of amazing. I mean, the thing about Gone Home is that one of the primary characters, not the person that you're controlling, but her sister, is kind of coming into her own as a young queer woman. And your experience, uncovering that is really interesting, because you're seeing it through the eyes of a sister who cares about her little sister and is, trying to figure out where she is and what's going on. The only way you experience the characters is through their voice and through their writing and drawing, not through seeing them.
Sometimes you just have to lie to Mom and Dad. Like when Lonnie asked me to see a band with her and stay over at her friend's place in the city after. That's a lie to Mom and Dad's situation. But it was so worth it. The girls on stage were just so loud and real and awesome. And everybody was moving together like one huge tide of sound. Between two songs, Lonnie leaned over and said, "How do you like your first show?" I was so happy. I felt tears starting in my eyes. And then she up and hugged me. I think she could tell.
You're able to then kind of maybe even apply your own self to some of the characters or your own experiences. So for me, it's a really touching, kind of deep experience playing the game.
You could say that Minecraft is a really queer game, for example, because it's very wide open for players to sort of do whatever they want with it. Minecraft is kind of like the queer party bottom of games. It's like it's available for anybody to sort of go in and be like, I want to do this with you, and Minecraft's like, okay, I'm down with that. And then of course there are games that are about queer people's lives, and I think those are incredibly important too, and there's a lot of amazing queer game creators who are making those kinds of games. And a lot of times those games structurally are really different. They don't just let players come in and do whatever they want. Instead, it's about a player having an encounter with someone else's life that they have to listen to. You are part of the story, but you're not the thing that makes it move or that changes the outcome.
What's happening right now is that you're seeing game companies begin to just slowly dip their toes in. And I think that's a really good start, but I think that the next step is going to have to be that they have to actually write well-written, fully fleshed out characters that are queer in games. And there's very, very, very few games that actually have that.
I think gaming developers, especially brave ones like David Gator, are coming out and saying, look, we can make changes. We can include different people, and that only enriches the story. So I think we're moving in the right direction. Will we have missteps? Absolutely. But I think anytime we're progressing as a nation with these issues, we will progress as an industry.
even in the most kind of mainstream games, we're starting to see more sophisticated writing and writing that incorporates different perspectives. Game designers know that people who are playing games are, increasing and diversifying, and it's not just, making a game for someone who might, have a more normative perspective on things.
Ultimately it's on us as to whether or not we're going to buy their game and tell them that that's the story we want to hear. But they absolutely should be, meeting us halfway. We don't need a reason to change video games. There needs to be a good reason not to, because this is about reflecting our society and connecting with our stories.
I think that as an entire gaming community, it's been, for the past 10 years, it's been, we want the entire world to see games as art, not as just games for kids, but video games are actually art. And so if you really want to consider video games art, if you want the entire world to be able to consider art, you can't limit storyline choices by saying, oh, well, we can't talk about sexuality, we can't talk about gender identity, we can't talk about race, we can't talk about misogyny, we can't talk about any of that stuff. We can really only use violence as a plotline, forwarding mechanism. And there's nothing wrong with using, that's fine. I'm not against, if people want more Call of Duties or whatever, that's fine. But I think that when you're saying that all these other things are off limits, then it's really constraining for people to create good art.
As an entertainment person overall, gaming is just beginning to scratch the surface of what I think it's gonna be. No experience in the world is as emotionally involving as playing a character and living another life. We talk about virtual reality, that's kind of it. And it's hugely powerful. So yeah, tying it back to equality, you think something that immersive isn't going to have impact on someone's life, on the way they see the world, the way they communicate in the future? It will.
Every geek who, would be watching this understands what it's like to have to come out as a geek, whether that be, admitting that you like certain geeky things or just being whatever traditionally a geek is, whether that be that you're really into reading or science stuff or video games or whatever. Being a geek is tough. You know that your life's going to be a little bit harder because you're not going to be kind of fitting the social norms.
I was the nerdiest kid in the world. I would talk to my classmates about ancient Chinese generals, and that stuff excited me, and they I don't know. I was always the biggest nerd.
So I was more okay being a gamer. Sure, I was always the nerd. I ate lunch with teachers every day of my high school experience and never had friends, but to me that was just who I was. Coming to terms with my gay identity, I guess I wouldn't have been able to do it as easily without the safety of the gaming world, and I'm grateful I was able to navigate both those identities, and now I'm able to share them both proudly.
Yeah, and I've always benefited from being professionally in games, because I could tell people oh yeah, I make video games. And people are like, whoa, what? But yeah, whenever I would talk about games, people would be polite, right? They'd be like, wow, that's really cool. And, and not really know what else to say, which is fine, but it's also, okay, I get it. You have you're not really into this. Yeah, so that is kind of like Stigma, and it's kind of a bunch of other complicated things too.
Gay culture, I think it really does come down to it. Gay culture itself is very body focused. So when you have to tell people that you're geeky, you do wind up having to have this kind of awkward conversation, and there's a lot of impressions that people have, right? Because people think geeks live at home with their mother, or they have terrible social cues, or any of the other myriad of you're weird components to them, and you don't necessarily want that judgment coming off on you.
It's yeah, geek culture has kind of risen up alongside other types of pop culture. But yeah, games I think have a special stigma of it's admitting that you play a lot of games is kind of yeah, there's a feeling ooh, really? If you go onto dating websites, there's this dating website, OkCupid, where there's all these questions that you answer, and one of the questions says, would you date someone who plays games more than 6 hours a day? And it's clearly one of these questions that's there to filter out the really undesirable people. And 6 hours is definitely a lot, But it was definitely interesting to hear about that in a dating context, and how it's one of these things where, like, the equivalent of the question, like, how often do you brush your teeth?
With gay culture in general, it's gotten better about geeky things as they become more popular, but it's also still challenging to find friendship in similar interests in a community that becomes very much about shapes rather than, desires.
And it just took a while for me to, like, in terms of, like, I'm a queer geek, and it took me until I was 23 to, like, be at a point where I decided, like, I don't want to have to settle to not be my true self. I want to be around people who are going to accept me as I really am, which is both a geek and someone who's queer.
It's this whole notion of being who you are. That's really all it is. When I was pushed up against a locker and spat at for being a geek in high school, if the same thing had happened because I was gay, why am I gonna do it to myself? Why am I gonna sit here and let the fear of being too nerdy for gay culture pull me back, or too gay for nerdy culture? It's more of an issue, I think, in the straight community right now, but fake nerds, gamer girls, everybody's on the internet saying, well, these people don't have a right to take a picture of themselves with a Super Nintendo. They're expressing themselves too, so lay off.
I think, until the last few years, I kept a pretty strict firewall between my life doing queer activism and in queer communities, and everything I was doing in games professionally and playing games online with my game friends. Like, those were just totally separate. On one hand, the people I knew through queer communities, a lot of the people that I knew that way were not really that interested in games. And so I just kind of knew, like, okay, these aren't people that I can play games with, even though they're incredibly important in my life. But I couldn't really talk to them about games. And on the other hand, I was working professionally in games, right? And I was never closeted about my relationships and being in relationships with women, but I really didn't talk too much about my experiences or my past or my background or anything. I wasn't so much afraid of discrimination, in part because I worked with a lot of really great people, but I didn't want to make people uncomfortable either. But then in the last few years, what happened was a ton of queer and trans game creators started to come out of the woodwork. They had been making games for a long time or playing games, but now they were really invested in making new types of games and really talking about their experiences through games. And I met a bunch of these folks, and I was blown away. I was like, oh my God, these guys are doing things that I really I was like, I didn't think that was really possible. And I realized, yeah, okay, this is a really important conversation that needs to happen. And also, maybe I can just get rid of that wall. And at the same time, there are more and more people in my queer communities who were talking openly about playing games. That old division for me has been in the process of dissolving. It's healthy to do, and I think it can happen more and more now because of shifts in the culture.
I don't think there's a gay person out there who would make being gay in gaming an issue, but because there's so much bullying and there's so much homophobia out in the gaming communities still, and don't get me wrong, it's getting better. But because there's so much of it still out there, we have to make it an issue.
I have seen people, other people that have experienced where it does influence what they play and what they don't play or how they play. A lot of people who are gay won't get on the mic online and talk. They'll actually use the chat function to type out their stuff.
Oh gosh, I mean, it all just sort of blurs into a haze of, terrible online harassment stories, mostly that I hear. In the mix with like awful YouTube comments, it all kind of just sinks into a cesspool of internet stupidity for me.
Me and my friends have actually talked about this extensively with other people that are gay and that want to play video games and constantly are like, what games are good to play, or to rephrase it, what games are safe to play.
There was a guy who used to call all of my moves gay just over and over again. If I would win, he'd be like, that's so gay. And he was like, do you want to play another round? I would always be like, sure. Even though he'd be like, that's gay, this is gay. At some point it just was like, I'm gay. He was like, oh man, I didn't mean it that way. And then didn't change any of his behavior. He just kept calling other things gay, but not like that.
For haters or trolls, they think that because no one will trace it back to them, that they can say whatever they want. In video games especially, like MMOs and online fighting games and such, that they're known for their trash talk. People consider it part of the game, and so you either have to accept that or not.
It feels like I have to come to this table to get online, to log in, to do any of this stuff. In order to exist in a by and large straight society, you have to change yourself constantly in ways you just don't think about. But then you get online or you get onto these big sites and you have these people who really feel like, well, I'm just saying gay, or I'm just saying it in a different way. And because I don't mean it the way that you're taking it, that releases its power. That releases me from any kind of responsibility.
And it's the structural problems that create this are really about the fact that a lot of jerks are just using games as a kind of clubhouse where they get to be a jerk. Games are still in a place in a kind of like cultural backwater and in the habit of making money just sort of by providing like a pleasure fix to a certain crowd of people where they sort of don't have to think too much about being a human being.
And I think when you are gay and when you are geeky, you have a very clear understanding of like, no, you saying that brings that word up. That puts that word in this conversation. That puts it in, even if you're saying it in a different context, even if you're trying to put this on the table and be like, no, but I'm putting it in stupid category, not, faggoty. Like, what you're saying is that like, my identity is part of your insult. And you want to explain to them like, it's not that you said it and I now think that you're a homophobe or I'm worried that you think I'm gay, because it's that you don't feel like I get respect enough or that my people get respect enough that you should have to change anything you do. And you can brush that up, you can gussy it, you can make it wear lipstick, but that's not gonna change that for me.
I hate the argument of freedom of speech, I can say what I want, because yeah, you can say what you want, but that doesn't make you immune to the consequences of somebody not liking what you just said to them.
I seriously doubt that an online game is the most effective vehicle for educating people. I don't doubt that it happens sometimes, and it's like, yeah, props for you for being brave, but playing online games at this point in the history of games is sort of like, yeah, like, oh, my hobby is to go swimming in toxic swamp water.
I can log in to any online game and still sometimes I'll be teamed up with, that's the worst when you get teamed up with players who, start saying that's gay or, man, enemy team, such fags, stuff like that. It's so frustrating to have to work with them. It's so frustrating to have to play against it, but yeah, like bullying is pretty tough. It takes a lot of guts to stand up to them, and sometimes, I just want to game. Sometimes I don't want to fight the fight. Sometimes I want to just be accepted, and it's very frustrating when that's not the case. I'm really proud of Riot because one of the main tenets is we don't tolerate homophobia.
I was really impressed. As somebody who's designed online community management tools, I thought that they were taking a really serious and well-considered approach.
In League of Legends, there's a system called a tribunal. Well, basically, players log in and they review a case of somebody that was reported too many times, and then they decide whether that person should be punished or pardoned. In the tribunal, the word fag is almost instant ban from everyone. Like the vast majority of our community, overwhelming majority, way more than the amount of gay people playing our game.
But yeah, so it's really smart and clever. When it works, it seems to work really well, but there are plenty of times when it doesn't work. So it's not the perfect solution, and I don't really think that there is one, short of the culture changing.
Most people are tolerant. Most people are neutral to the issue. Most people are not dicks, right? They're not homophobic, they're totally accepting, they're totally tolerant, but not being gay and potentially not even having someone close in their life who is gay, they're also probably not gonna be a crusader. So you need to have those figures, you need to have those people that step up and say, hey, it's not okay for you to be homophobic. I'm gay, or my friend is gay, or my brother's gay, or my, anything. We need people to step up and start saying that and saying, it's not okay for you to be this way.
As a gay gamer, you have to kind of make your own safe space. If you have to set up rules, you have to find people that you get along with, that you're able to play this game with, that you can enjoy your time, the time and energy and money that you're spending on this game with people that aren't going to, be bigots or have hate speech.
What people want is a way to be able to play with people who they can feel trusting and safe around, who are not going to be jerks. I don't know that there's a real easy solution to any of this, and it just continues to be a problem for online game makers, and it's just going to continue to be a plague until there's a much more massive shift in the culture.
I wish there were an easier way to get across to people what it means to have a safe space. Nobody in the gay community is saying, hey, we don't want straight content in gaming. But it's very frustrating when there's people out there who say, hey, we don't want gay content in gaming.
I'm actually pretty interested in that argument. Like, at one level you can look at that and say, oh, that's just some sort of homophobic right-wing argument of like someone who just doesn't want to see gay people. I think a lot of people saying that are not necessarily, members of the Westboro Baptist Church, right? Or maybe they're not even Republicans. What I think that they want is a space free from cares, where they don't have to think about anything that might trouble them. So games are already the safe space for those guys, right? And what makes it safe for them is that they don't have to think about any of these things that maybe at some level they feel bad about, or it makes them think too hard, or it reminds them of some problem they're having in the rest of their life. And this is just another case of games making themselves available as little safe hidey holes for people to run into. And of course of course you can sell that. Of course you can make money off of that. And it does create this little pleasure bubble, which is endangered by the intrusion of what feels like a real world subject.
Having a gamer group that is gay friendly. I have yet to find any gay gaming group ever that is exclusive. It's just, if you want to be a part of this group, we welcome you no matter who you are. You just have to be gay friendly. No homophobia is tolerated. That seems pretty simple to me. Like, I don't get why that's a bad thing. It's not a special place only for gays. It's a special place where gays don't have to fight all the time, where gays don't have to get bullied. It's just a safe space.
We need a safe space because microaggressions exist and are real. And when I say microaggressions, I mean the straight gaming community is, if you ask individuals, like, are you okay with gay people? I think the vast majority would say totally fine. And then you would say, what do you think of a male character in a dress? And they would say, that person is a freak, or that's really funny, or it's stupid, or like, that's the joke.
The armory's prepared, shuttle is primed. It'll still be a few hours before the fleet's mobilized, though.
Now we just wait.
Yeah. I was hoping you might want to wait together.
Stay here with me. Till the call comes.
Of course. Not one moment for granted.
And they don't realize that part of that is, derogatory. And it comes across that way and it makes you feel unsafe. And I think safe spaces for queer gaming and for gay gamers really is important because you get to eliminate those things, by and large. You move away from the joke is on you, or the joke is on you being different, into the best thing in the world is hanging out with your friends and people who are welcoming to you.
Yeah, so something like GaymerX or the Queer Gaming Conference, I think are extremely valuable as just places for talking about these issues, which are interesting, which are relevant to the future of the game industry.
We've written articles on our website already dealing with why this is an important issue, and we do get a generally good feedback from people who are not LGBT and They do kind of understand why it needs to happen because you don't see it at the major gaming conventions. But then, of course, you get the people who still don't really get it, but it's not quite as negative as it probably would have been like 5 or 10 years ago.
A lot of people in game development, in game academia, are watching these spaces to see what's going on because they know at some level that there's potential there for change, for innovation, for unusual, interesting things to happen. That the ideas that are produced there are going to reflect back into the production of games that's being done by all of the queer and gay folks who are inside the industry.
A lot of people may not understand why gaming conventions that are geared towards LGBT people need to exist, but those same people may also not really realize that there are places in the world where you cannot be openly LGBT, and this convention is open to those people, and they can come to this convention and be exactly who they are, and that's what's really great about it.
When you can find spaces for yourself where you know that that's not how everyone feels, where everyone is sort of being very encouraging of other things, of exploring alternative options of how you're playing and what you're doing, and the vibe and the culture, you really do get a much better experience of what it's like to find community.
So I'm at GaymerX because not only am I the senior editor of Game Revolution and just being a journalist, but I'm also here because I'm a gamer.
I'm a gamer. I'm a gay gamer, so of course I wanted to come to GaymerX.
This is the first LGBT gaming convention.
It's the only convention of its kind.
I heard this was coming up, and it seemed like a really interesting opportunity to connect with not only interesting science fiction people, but actually gay science fiction people.
I felt, it was my duty to come to this convention. I've been working in the game industry for gotta be like 13, 14 years now.
I've gone to a lot of other gaming conventions over my time as a gaming journalist over the past 3 years, and there's a severe absence of LGBT themes at those conventions.
I mean, I live in San Francisco where it's, more accepted, but all across America there are people who feel like they're cut out of the gaming community and feel discriminated against.
It's really exciting to be around a group of people who are, like me.
To, be among a community of people who are kind of accepting and more open-minded.
I think it seems like the primary goal for GaymerX is to create a safe space for queer gamers.
This is a safe space where everyone can just be who they want to be, and that's what makes GaymerX historic.
With the Kickstarter and everything, it showed that there are many of us out there.
To me, it's exciting that finally the gamer community is realizing that, there's difference and that's good and that's something to be celebrated.
And it's very exciting to see a national stage where people can come together. Gaming means so much to so many people, and so does just being a gay man. Having your own sexual identity, it should never define somebody entirely, but it is a defining aspect of our lives, and we need to be able to come together on common ground about it.
So my name is Matt Kahn, and I am the founder and creative director of GaymerX. I was just really surprised that there wasn't anything like this out there before. And so the reason why, I created GaymerX is really for me. And when I say for me, I don't mean me now, I mean me in high school, me, in freshman year when I was just barely figuring out that yes, I am a gay male. And yes, I still love Earthbound and Mario RPG and all these nerdy games that I love. And so I felt like I could never really have a place where I could just be myself. So I started a group called SF Gamers, SF, gamers. And I just tried to find every queer geek in San Francisco and found 10, 20 of them, and we had a meetup. And since then it just started growing kind of like astronomically. But people were like, I think they came to that same realization that I did. Yes, there's finally a place where I can be truly myself. I can be gay, talk about gay stuff, talk about guys, talk about whatever, but still be super nerdy. Like, you want to play some Magic, you want to talk about play some games, like actually have that all in one spot, and people could be their true selves. And I think that once they came to me and told me that how much it meant to them, I realized that I wanted to extend this out to more people than just the Bay Area. I wanted this to be everything to everybody. I wanted people who are trans to feel like this is a safe space. I wanted people who may be genderqueer or whatever to feel that they, that they have a safe space here. But I also wanted, I wanted everyone to feel like they had something. Pretty much everything surprised me, honestly. When I went on stage for the opening ceremony and I saw, people, we had chairs lined out and people were backed up. And I looked outside when I was doing interviews here, and there's people back, for just the line to get in was going around the corner and up to around the other street. That was really unreal and very surreal.
And as a lesbian, it's actually really huge to have this kind of convention, because generally when I go to press events or when I'm out and about at conventions, I normally don't really meet a lot of women, and we had I feel like a really profound moment during one of the meetups we had here at the convention for women in the gaming community, and I walked into a room full of like around 40 to 50 women who are all there because they love video games. And that was something in the past 3 years as a game journalist that I have never experienced.
Events like GaymerX actually create a space that's safe, that people feel comfortable in, and that actually celebrates games unabashedly. Games themselves are, a medium to be celebrated, but also a medium that needs to probably change and be more diverse. And I think that events like that show the game makers, actually, that there's a huge audience out there.
GaymerX was a big deal for a lot of reasons, but I think first and foremost was it got major coverage from places that don't cover gay things all that often. I think in a year where you had us getting so many more rights, it really did feel nice to sort of go to a convention that felt for us, especially in the wake, I would say, of things like PAX comments that came out and the stuff that you're having where you're seeing, as we gain visibility, you're seeing pushback. It was nice to have a convention that felt like it was there for the people that the other conventions aren't for.
It felt so liberating, so incredibly liberating for me to be able to say, hey, if I wanted to start up a conversation with someone because I kind of like them and ask them for coffee or whatever, I can do it and it's normal. Like, what? This never happens anywhere that I go. If I'm at a gay event, nobody even knows what Mega Man 2 is. If I'm at a gamer event, like I said, I'm not comfortable.
I think it's really important that spaces like GaymerX exist, especially to address what's going on with people who work inside the industry and work conditions. That is, to me, one of the sort of most important human issues, that people get to be themselves, that they're free from harassment and discrimination in the workplace, and that they can actually, as creative professionals, put something of their own experiences into the games they make without having to disguise or cut it off or completely avoid it.
I know just from experience walking around the con, just running into any random person, I can talk to them without, questioning myself, feeling self-conscious, because I know they have two huge parts of their lives in common with mine, and that double commonality can't be denied as a friendship and bonding experience.
I believe that GaymerX is a very historic thing. Hope that there will be more GaymerXs in the future, and we'll get larger and bigger and have a bigger audience and a bigger voice, obviously. But I think it's good to make our presence known. Hopefully, it'll be transformative in showing other video game companies and developers and other geek venues that we are an audience and that we're here, and don't be afraid to market to us. Don't be afraid to tell our stories.
I feel like we're at the beginning of a big change in games. I mean, we're only at the 51st year of video games today. And I think that we're gonna see this medium mature, we're gonna see it diversify, we're gonna see all kinds of people being able to make their own games. I really believe that a lot of the ways that we think about games and the dominant genres in games are going to shift.
I'm excited about seeing more independent creators, people who are working out on the margins or even the big indies, take on more unusual and interesting experiments, push the boundaries in different ways, but in really questioning a lot of the assumptions that we already have about games. And there are a lot of cool experiments going on like that, so I have faith that that's going to continue to happen.
The reality is that games have been connected with at least society, and society has sexuality in it, in a really specific way since they began. Probably the first game I ever played, and for I think a lot of people, one of their first memories is Mario, where you are rescuing a princess. Even before that, you've got Donkey Kong, right, where you are rescuing a princess. I want someone who represents me on this screen, and it's not really about sexuality as it is about representation.
It's partially about educating people, spreading the word with documentaries and conferences and making sure those stories are told. But it's gonna take, I think, the bravery of the developers and the people who are passionate about video games to step up in this industry and make a stand.
I believe that the culture has begun to change slowly because, I mean, what you'll see like from companies like BioWare is like they're starting to incorporate more LGBT themes into their games, which is great. And I really think that in, you know, the next 5 years, or even decade, that we'll see more of that in the major AAA titles.
More like GA. Why? The Family Research Council are doubtful of anything but conventional spousal arousal. The downfall of society is gay games. It's like the KKK came at gays, and the lamest of ways laying the blame on EA, aiming the flames in the face, but they have made a mistake. The very basic game that makes a game is choice. So if you take the choice away, then what's the flaming point? It is okay to go gaming. Whatever pushes your buttons, it is okay to go gaming. It's just cooperative play. There's gays in cinema, there's gays in literature, there's gays in nature, even gay general practitioners. Folks go for overthese or are testicular particular. So isn't prohibiting it a little bit ridiculous to get your knickers in a twist over someone else's? Thinking too much about who's bumping pals with. You waste your days away complaining about trousers and who pulls them down. Is there something you should tell us? It's okay to go gaming. Whatever pushes your buttons, it is okay to go gaming. If Jesus was a gamer, he'd play Mass Effect. And the fact that there was gayness wouldn't make him that upset. See, he'd be more inclined to deplore the kind of bigotry that enforces don't ask, don't tell inside the military. And that's the thing, I see you righteously fight for guidance, but on gratuitous violence, then you are silent. But unlike the Rebel Alliance, you penny defiance. So whether it's pious, we'll die under the light of science. Because it is okay to go gaming. Whatever pushes your buttons, it is okay